Hey everybody, how's it going? This week's video is going to be a green tree python question and answer. Now my good friend Julian posted a video last week in which he solicited for questions about green tree pythons and green tree python keeping, and he got barraged with emails. So he contacted me and asked me if I might be interested in helping him answer some of those questions. So here I am. The first question is from Dragon Keeper Sam. He says, I'm a fan of chondros and several other species of snakes. My question is, how many green tree pythons have bad attitudes? Well, that's a good question. Most snakes are like people. Their attitudes vary from person to person on an individual basis. But tree pythons, because they've evolved in an insular situation where populations are separated from one another by large breaks in geography or by water island uh, scenarios, there are certain populations that probably because they've evolved with a certain type of predator are more defensive than others. And the one that comes to mind is Biak. It's a large island off the northern coast of Irian Jaya, which is the Indonesian half of New Guinea. Now, those animals tend to be larger for the most part, and they also tend to be more defensive. Biaks don't take much prodding to offer a bite. So for that reason, it's not one that I normally recommend for somebody's first snake. Um, Other populations like Aru, an island that's well off the southwestern coast of Irian Jaya, tend to be more timid and docile. So they vary from place to place. But yes, Dragon Keeper Sam, there are differences, and there are certain populations that are uh, well known for being more defensive than others. The next question is from Hilm Steve. He says, I'm a chondro virgin, but I want to get one. What's the best type of chondro for a beginner? That's a great question, too. My best suggestion for a beginner is to find a captive breeder who can provide a known entity, an animal that has feeding records, an animal that has an established history, and an animal that has a pedigree, because those three things will tell you how well the animal is going to do for you. They'll tell you whether or not the animal behaviorally is going to be a good match for you. They'll tell you whether or not you're going to have issues with trying to keep the animal fed and to make sure that it has good clean sheds. That's my biggest advice, is to find somebody who can walk you through your first animal. Next question is from the son of Sigard. He says, is it better to keep green tree pythons in cages or tubs? That is a sort of a personal preference. If you're dealing with a very small collection, it's great to have everything in a big, giant, spacious enclosure. But when you start keeping tree pythons and you get your first clutch of 20 to 30 babies, you find out real fast that the idea of separating 30 snakes into 30 adult size enclosures gets to the point where it's not practically feasible. So keeping them in tubs allows a situation that might be a little less aesthetic, but still quite functional in terms of being able to maintain cleanliness and to be able to do so in a way that doesn't eat up weeks of effort. So it's personal preference. Next question is from Kava Jason. How do you feel about Bushmaster chondros? Well, for those who don't know, Bushmaster is an importer and farmer based out of Colorado, and they've got a farm in Indonesia. They keep and breed a number of species there on the farm and then export the babies for international and domestic sale. Uh, I can say without any doubt that Bushmaster does the best job I have ever seen by anyone that farms reptiles at maintaining a clean and functional facility. It looks like a facility that you'd want to visit on vacation, and not just because you were interested in reptiles. It's beautiful. And the animals, I know that Cameron took great steps to make sure that they'd had a clean water system, and to be able to provide a scenario where they weren't going to be risking the exposure to uh, parasites and that sort of thing. Now, it's still possible when you farm raise an animal to get parasites, but I can say that the animals that I've acquired from Cameron over the years all ended up being clean and vigorous, well started animals. So take it for what it's worth, but you know, I think Bushmaster does a great job at doing what they do. The one thing I would recommend is to try to contact Cameron directly, because he sells to a lot of resellers, and you know, the trip from Indonesia to the United States, to another dealer, to a show, to all of these things can induce a lot of stress in an animal. So the more you can alleviate that portion of it, the better off you'll be. The last question is from Julian. He says, what do you or would you like to see in the future of the designer market in terms of color and species progression? Well, I'm kind of old school. I got my start in keeping reptiles and amphibians because I liked going into the field. So while I appreciate designer morphs, I'm not as driven by the extreme nature of how they could potentially look. Now that might take you by surprise considering the fact that I'm working with albino tree pythons, but uh, I I think the primary aspect of future breeding needs to be directed more towards a general appreciation for the opportunity to keep a fantastic animal, and not necessarily towards the financial trappings that keeping that animal will garner. And that's probably my biggest sort of philosophical split with, it seems, a large portion of the captive breeding community, because everybody got sucked up into this idea that, you know, they would keep things that maybe they weren't completely invested in emotionally, because they had the potential to generate a financial windfall for doing it. And unfortunately, you start pushing people in a bad direction when that sort of thing is going on. So my focus would be for everybody to keep what they enjoy and what they like and what they learn the most about, and what follow their fancy. Do what you like. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing, and you'll get more satisfaction out of doing that than you will out of trying to keep up in the great arms race. Um, if you like blue ones, keep blue ones. If you like yellow ones, keep yellow ones. Uh, but you know, don't keep something that you're not completely emotionally vested in, or it'll come back to bite you in the butt. um, Anyway, thanks for listening, and make sure to tune in next week. I'm hoping to have the editing done on some of the video for the thermistor information, thermostat information, and egg box information. So make sure and check back.